Chapter 1, The Underground World. In a quiet corner of the vast city, hidden beneath the bustling streets and towering buildings, there existed a world that few knew about. This world was not filled with the usual skyscrapers, bright lights, or endless noise of the surface, but rather a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, home to creatures that most people thought only existed in children's stories. It was a place where the ordinary became extraordinary, and the smallest of creatures held the power to change the course of history. In this hidden world lived a mole named Milo. Unlike the other moles who were content to burrow and scurry beneath the earth, Milo was different. He had always been curious, his small eyes gleaming with a thirst for knowledge and a longing for something more than the endless darkness of the tunnels. Where his fellow moles saw dirt and rocks, Milo saw possibility and adventure. He had spent his days dreaming of what lay above the surface, of the lives of humans and the wonders they created with their hands. But the elders of his mole community had long warned against venturing to the surface. The world above is not for us, they would say. It is a dangerous place, full of predators and things beyond our understanding. They spoke of the surface as if it were a realm of peril, a place where no mole could ever truly belong. Yet, the more they warned, the more Milo's curiosity grew. One day, while exploring a particularly deep and ancient tunnel, Milo stumbled upon something extraordinary, a small, weathered book. It was buried beneath the roots of an old tree that had once grown above ground. The book was unlike anything Milo had ever seen. It was made of soft, worn leather, and its pages were filled with strange symbols and diagrams that seemed to swirl and shift as he gazed upon them. The moment he touched the book, a strange feeling washed over him, a sensation that the world he knew was not all there was. There was more. And he had to discover it. For the next few days, Milo studied the book in secret, learning its contents and deciphering the symbols that seemed to speak to him in a language he had never heard. The book spoke of a hidden path that led to the surface, a secret way that only those brave enough to seek it would find. It promised a new world, a world of light, color, and endless possibilities. And so, with the book as his guide, Milo made the decision that would change his life forever: he would leave the underground and venture to the surface. As he prepared for his journey, Milo couldn't help but feel a sense of fear mixed with excitement. The underground world, with its familiar tunnels and the comfort of his community, was all he had ever known. But he had felt for too long that there was something more waiting for him. Something that could give his life meaning, purpose, and adventure. The day came when Milo made his way to the surface. The tunnel he followed was narrow and twisting, leading him to an opening that was covered in thick vines. As he pushed through the vines and emerged into the open air, Milo blinked against the harsh sunlight. It was brighter than anything he had ever imagined, and the colors of the world seemed to stretch out endlessly before him. He was standing in a vast, green field, surrounded by towering trees and the soft rustle of the wind through the leaves. The world above was alive with movement, birds flitted through the air, insects hummed in the grass, and distant sounds of human activity echoed in the distance. Milo's heart raced with excitement as he took his first steps onto the surface. This was the world he had always dreamed of. But as he ventured further into the unknown, Milo quickly realized that the surface was not as perfect as he had imagined. There were dangers here, too. Predators roamed the fields, and the humans he had once thought of as gentle and kind were not always so welcoming. In the distance, he saw a group of them walking along a road, their eyes scanning the ground for any sign of trouble. Milo had entered a world where nothing was certain. It was a place where he would have to navigate carefully, make friends, and overcome obstacles in ways he had never before imagined. But Milo was determined. He had come to this world to find something more, and he would not stop until he discovered what that was. Chapter 2, The First Encounter. Milo's paws were covered in soft, damp grass as he ventured deeper into the vast world of the surface. The smell of the earth was rich and full, and every sound seemed amplified: the chirping of birds, the rustling of the trees, and the distant hum of a human settlement. His heart raced with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The world above had been everything he imagined and more, but it was also far more dangerous than he had anticipated. As he continued, he saw a group of animals in the distance, a family of rabbits nibbling on the grass, their large ears twitching at the slightest sound. Milo froze, watching them closely. He knew that the underground world had its dangers, but these creatures seemed different. They were gentle and peaceful, their eyes wide and innocent. The idea of hunting or attacking them never crossed his mind, but he also realized that the surface creatures didn't always trust moles like him. He took a cautious step forward, careful not to make a sound, but before he could take another step, he heard a rustling sound behind him. His small heart skipped a beat. Milo turned quickly, and to his shock, he saw a large bird, a hawk, with sharp talons and a menacing stare, gliding toward him. The air seemed to freeze as the hawk's wings beat loudly, and it swooped down with frightening speed. Milo barely had time to react before the hawk's talons grazed his fur, narrowly missing him. Panic surged through him, and he darted into the underbrush, his tiny heart pounding in his chest. The hawk circled overhead, its eyes locked onto him, but it was too slow to catch him in the thick bushes. Milo scrambled through the thick foliage, his mind racing. He had read about predators, but nothing had prepared him for the real danger that lurked in the world above. As the hawk flew off into the distance, Milo collapsed onto the soft earth, trembling. He had narrowly escaped death. The surface world wasn't the safe and peaceful place he had imagined. The dangers were real, and the reality of survival had begun to sink in. After taking a few moments to collect himself, Milo realized that he could not let fear control him. He had come to this world to find answers, to understand what lay beyond the walls of his underground home. But if he was to succeed, he would have to be more careful, more aware of his surroundings. He needed to learn how to navigate this world, not just to survive, but to thrive. With renewed determination, Milo continued on his journey, keeping a low profile as he moved through the forest. The more he observed, the more he realized that the surface world was a place of constant motion, a delicate balance of life and death. He would have to learn its rules and adapt if he hoped to uncover the mysteries he sought. Hours passed, and Milo finally found a small clearing near a river. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and the air was cool and fresh. It was a peaceful spot, a brief respite from the dangers of the world. Milo took a moment to rest, drinking from the river and catching his breath. As he gazed at the water, he felt a strange sense of loneliness. He had always been part of a community back underground, surrounded by moles who understood him, who knew his every move. Here, he was alone. The vastness of the surface world overwhelmed him, and he couldn't help but wonder if he had made a mistake by leaving the comfort of his home. Was this the life he truly sought? It was at that moment, when Milo's doubt seemed to overwhelm him, that he heard a rustling from the other side of the clearing. His ears perked up, and he quickly crouched low to the ground, trying to stay hidden. Out of the bushes emerged a small creature, a rabbit, not much bigger than Milo himself, with soft, white fur and bright, curious eyes. The rabbit seemed to sense his presence and paused for a moment, sniffing the air. For a brief second, their eyes met, and Milo could see that the rabbit was just as cautious as he was. He didn't move, unsure whether the rabbit would flee or stay. To his surprise, the rabbit sat down on its hind legs, its long ears twitching. After a few moments, it spoke, its voice soft and gentle, though full of curiosity. "Are you lost?" the rabbit asked, tilting its head. Milo blinked, unsure of how to respond. Talking animals weren't something he was used to, not in the way that humans or other creatures communicated. But there was something about this rabbit that made him feel safe, something in its eyes that spoke of understanding. I'm not lost," Milo replied carefully. "But I don't know what I'm looking for." The rabbit nodded, as if it understood. "It's not uncommon to feel that way," it said thoughtfully. "The world above can be overwhelming, especially for those who've never seen it before. It's easy to get lost, even if you know where you're going." Milo was taken aback by the rabbit's wisdom. He had expected to find danger at every turn, but here was this small creature, offering him advice without fear or judgment. "I'm Milo," he said, introducing himself. "I'm Fern," the rabbit replied with a smile. "You're far from home, aren't you?" "I'm from underground," Milo explained. "I've always wondered what the surface was like. I thought it would be a place of adventure, but it's different than I imagined." Fern's expression softened. "It's not easy up here, but it's also full of beauty. There's more to this world than what meets the eye. You just have to look closely." Milo felt a sense of relief wash over him. For the first time since he arrived, he didn't feel so alone. Fern had shared something important. There was more to the surface than just its dangers. It was a place of beauty, waiting to be discovered. Chapter 3, The Lesson of the Surface. Milo sat quietly next to Fern, the soft sound of the river flowing beside them. The air was filled with the scent of wildflowers, and the trees above rustled gently in the breeze. Fern had introduced him to the wonders of the surface in ways he had never imagined, teaching him how to notice the small details, how the leaves shimmered in the sunlight, how the earth hummed with life beneath their paws. He had been so focused on the dangers of the surface world that he had forgotten to see its beauty, its delicate balance. As they sat together, Fern spoke of the world above in a way that made Milo's heart feel lighter. "The surface isn't just a place of danger and predators," she said, her voice calm and steady. "It's a place of change. Nothing here stays the same for long. The seasons change, the animals adapt, and the earth shifts. You have to learn how to move with it, to understand the rhythms of life." Milo listened intently, eager to absorb every word. The more he thought about Fern's words, the more he realized how much he had to learn. He had come to the surface seeking adventure, but it was more than that. The surface was a place of growth, a place where he could change, if he allowed it. "The key," Fern continued, "is to never stop learning. Even the oldest trees grow, even the smallest creatures find their way." She looked at him with a glint of wisdom in her eyes. "What are you looking for, Milo?" Milo paused, considering the question. What was he looking for? Was it adventure? Knowledge? Or was it something more? He had always been driven by the desire to understand the world, to see beyond the surface of things. But what did that truly mean? What was the purpose of his journey? "I think," Milo began slowly, "I'm looking for a place where I belong. A place where I can be more than just a mole. I want to understand this world, to be part of it. But sometimes, it feels like I'm just too small to make a difference." Fern's ears twitched, and she gave him a gentle smile. "You may be small, but you have a big heart, Milo. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Don't let the world make you feel small. Every creature has a role to play, even if it's not always clear at first." Milo thought about her words for a long time. For so long, he had believed that being small made him insignificant, that he had to prove himself in a world that seemed so much bigger than he was. But Fern's words made him realize that perhaps he didn't need to change the world all at once. Maybe the key was to embrace his own smallness, to find his place in the world not by force, but by understanding. As the day began to fade into evening, Fern invited Milo to follow her to a nearby meadow where the fireflies began to glow, casting a soft, golden light over the landscape. It was a magical sight, one that made Milo feel as though he had stepped into a dream. The surface world, he realized, was full of hidden wonders. Each moment, each place had its own story, waiting to be discovered. That night, as they settled into the soft grass beneath the stars, Fern shared one last piece of advice with Milo. "The surface can be unpredictable, Milo. But that's what makes it so beautiful. It's a place where things are always changing, always growing. You may not have all the answers now, but if you keep your heart open, you'll find your way." Milo lay back and gazed at the sky, the stars twinkling above him. He felt a sense of peace he had never experienced before. For the first time since he had left the underground, he wasn't afraid. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be challenges and moments of doubt. But he also knew that he didn't have to face them alone. The surface world, with all its uncertainty, are not separate, but intertwined. You are the bridge between worlds, the one who will help guide the surface and the underground toward a future of harmony. Milo stood tall, the weight of his purpose settling firmly within him. He wasn't just a wanderer anymore. He was a guide, a leader, and a creator of change. He had walked through the unknown, learned from the surface, and come to understand that his place was not in the shadows, but in the light, guiding others toward a better future. Over the following weeks, Milo worked alongside the changelings, learning from them, and sharing what he had learned. Together, they began to build a network between the surface and the underground, a bridge that would allow both worlds to connect and learn from each other. It wasn't always easy, there were still challenges to face, obstacles to overcome, but Milo was no longer afraid. He had found his purpose, and he was ready to face whatever the future had in store. One evening, as he stood on a hill overlooking the vast expanse of the surface world, Milo felt a deep sense of peace. The sky stretched endlessly before him, the stars beginning to twinkle as the day faded into night. The world was beautiful, in all its complexity, and he had become part of it. He wasn't just a mole. He was part of something much larger, a force for change, a bridge between worlds. And as he gazed out at the horizon, he knew that his journey was far from over. There was still so much to learn, so much to discover. But he was no longer alone. He had found his place in the world. And that place was exactly where he was meant to be. The end was a place where he could grow, change, and find his place. As he drifted off to sleep, Milo dreamed of the journey ahead. The world above was vast, and there was so much more to explore. But with each new day, he would take another step, ready to learn, to adapt, and to discover what it meant to truly belong. Chapter 4: The Unexpected Encounter. The days that followed were filled with new experiences. Milo traveled with Fern, exploring the meadows, forests, and rivers that made up the surface world. They encountered many different creatures, each one with its own story, each one offering a lesson that Milo took to heart. Some were kind and gentle, like the deer who taught him about patience, while others, like the fox, were cunning and quick-witted, showing Milo the importance of thinking on his feet. But it was one unexpected encounter that would forever change the course of Milo's journey. One afternoon, as Milo and Fern were wandering through a dense forest, they stumbled upon a clearing that was unlike any they had seen before. The trees here were ancient, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their leaves dark and thick. There was an eerie stillness in the air, and the sunlight barely penetrated the canopy above. It was as if they had stepped into a different world entirely. In the center of the clearing stood a large stone, its surface covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Milo felt a shiver run down his spine as he approached the stone, his instincts telling him that there was something powerful about this place. "This is the Stone of Echoes," Fern whispered, her voice filled with awe. "It's said to be a place where the past and present meet. A place where one can hear the whispers of those who have come before." Milo's heart raced. The Stone of Echoes? He had heard legends of such a place, but he never imagined he would find it. The stone seemed to beckon him, and before he knew it, he was standing before it, his paws hovering above its surface. As he touched the stone, a rush of memories flooded his mind, visions of the underground world, of his home, his family, and the life he had left behind. It was as if the stone was allowing him to hear the voices of his ancestors, their wisdom and knowledge pouring into him. But just as quickly as the visions had appeared, they vanished. Milo stepped back, his mind spinning. What had just happened? Was it a dream? Or was the Stone of Echoes truly a place where the past could be heard? Fern watched him closely, her expression thoughtful. "The stone doesn't give answers, Milo. It shows you possibilities. It's up to you to interpret what you see, to find the meaning." Milo nodded slowly. He had felt something in the stone, something that connected him to the world in a way he couldn't explain. It was as if he had touched the very fabric of time itself. As they left the clearing and continued on their journey, Milo's thoughts were consumed with the Stone of Echoes. He knew that his journey was far from over, and that the surface world still held many secrets. But one thing was clear: he had much to learn, and the road ahead would be filled with both challenges and revelations. Chapter 5: The Heart of the Forest. Milo's encounter with the Stone of Echoes had left him with more questions than answers. The brief vision he experienced lingered in his mind like a fog that refused to lift. He could still see the images of the underground, his old home, his family, and the familiar dark tunnel stretching far and wide. But the surface world, the new world he had come to explore, felt distant in comparison, like it was a separate existence altogether. As the days passed, Milo continued his journey with Fern, though his thoughts often wandered back to the stone. Fern had been quiet ever since the encounter, sensing that the moment had left a deep impression on him. She didn't press him for answers, understanding that the surface world held mysteries that sometimes needed time to unravel. The landscape around them was constantly changing. One day, they found themselves deep in the heart of a forest, a place where the trees stood tall and ancient, their trunks as wide as caves. The canopy above was thick, blocking out much of the sunlight, casting the forest floor in shadows. The air was heavy with the scent of moss and the dampness of the earth, and the only sounds that could be heard were the rustling of the leaves and the occasional call of a bird. "This is the heart of the forest," Fern said, her voice soft and reverent. "Few creatures venture this deep, for the forest is old and full of secrets. It is a place where the natural world thrives in its purest form, untouched by the hands of time." Milo's curiosity piqued. The forest was alive with an energy he had never felt before. There was something magical about it, something that seemed to pulse beneath the surface of the earth itself. The trees whispered to one another in a language he couldn't understand, but it was a language that felt familiar, as though the forest had been speaking to him his entire life. As they walked deeper into the forest, Milo noticed something unusual. The ground beneath his paws seemed to vibrate ever so slightly, a subtle hum that resonated through his body. It was as though the earth itself was alive, breathing in rhythm with the world around them. The trees, too, seemed to move in time with the wind, their leaves swaying in a pattern that felt deliberate and intentional. Fern noticed his distracted gaze and smiled. "The heart of the forest is where the world's energy is strongest. The earth here holds memories of all things, living and non-living. Those who listen closely can hear the stories of the past, the secrets of the land." Milo looked around, his eyes wide with wonder. He had always thought of the surface as a place of chaos and unpredictability, but this forest was different. It was calm and ancient, and its energy was both humbling and overwhelming. He could feel it in his very bones, the sense that the forest had been here long before any creature had walked its paths, and that it would remain long after they were gone. As they continued their journey, Milo's thoughts drifted back to the Stone of Echoes. What had it shown him? Why had it felt so important? Was there a deeper meaning to the images he had seen? He couldn't shake the feeling that the answers he sought were hidden somewhere, buried deep within the surface world. He had come here to find himself, but perhaps, in doing so, he would also uncover the true nature of the world he had left behind. The deeper they ventured, the more the forest seemed to shift. The trees grew taller and denser, and the air became thicker with the smell of ancient growth. The path ahead became obscured by vines and roots that snaked across the forest floor, making it harder to navigate. Fern led the way with ease, her small form weaving gracefully through the underbrush, but Milo found himself struggling to keep up. "Don't worry, Milo," Fern said over her shoulder, sensing his frustration. "This part of the forest is known to challenge those who enter. It's meant to test your resolve, to see if you truly understand the balance of the world." Milo nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what she meant. The forest was beautiful, but it was also a puzzle. Every step felt like a new challenge, every turn a reminder of how much he had to learn. The deeper they went, the more Milo realized that the surface was not just a place to explore, but a place that would demand everything from him. His journey was no longer just about seeking adventure, it was about finding meaning in a world that was both vast and unknowable. After what seemed like hours of wandering, the forest suddenly opened up into a small clearing. In the center stood a massive tree, its bark silver and glowing faintly in the dim light. The tree's roots spread wide across the ground, and its branches reached high into the canopy, disappearing into the darkness above. It was the largest tree Milo had ever seen, and there was an aura of quiet power that surrounded it. "This," Fern said, her voice filled with reverence, "is the tree of wisdom. It is said to be the oldest living thing on the surface. Many creatures come here seeking answers, but only those who are truly ready will receive them." Milo approached the tree with a sense of awe. The air around it felt heavy with ancient knowledge, and he could sense the deep wisdom that lay within its roots. As he stepped closer, he felt a strange pull, a magnetic force that seemed to draw him in. "You may ask the tree one question," Fern said, her voice low. "But choose wisely, for the answers it gives are not always what you expect." Milo's mind raced. What should he ask? The surface world was full of mysteries, and there were so many things he didn't understand. But one question rose above the rest, a question that had been on his mind ever since he left the underground. "What is my purpose?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. For a moment, nothing happened. The wind ceased, the birds fell silent, and the earth seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the tree's branches began to sway, as though responding to his words. The air around him grew thicker, and the faint glow of the tree's bark intensified. Milo closed his eyes, waiting for the answer. And then, it came. Chapter 6, The Answer from the Tree. Milo stood in front of the tree of wisdom, his heart pounding as the silence deepened. The air around him seemed to thicken, and the faint glow of the tree's silver bark intensified. It was as if the entire forest held its breath, waiting for the answer to the question he had asked. What was his purpose? The question that had haunted him since his first steps onto the surface. For a moment, everything seemed still. There was no wind, no sound, only the soft hum of the earth. Seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, the tree's branches began to sway, as though responding to his words. The air around him grew thicker, and the faint glow of the tree's bark intensified. Milo closed his eyes, waiting for the answer. And then, it came. Chapter 6, The Answer from the Tree. Milo stood in front of the tree of wisdom, his heart pounding as the silence deepened. The air around him seemed to thicken, and the faint glow of the tree's silver bark intensified. It was as if the entire forest held its breath, waiting for the answer to the question he had asked. What was his purpose? The question that had haunted him since his first steps onto the surface. For a moment, everything seemed still. There was no wind, no sound, only the soft hum of the earth beneath his paws. Then, very slowly, the branches of the tree began to sway, even though there was no breeze. Milo's heart raced as the tree seemed to respond to his question. The ancient tree's deep, resonant voice, not one he could hear with his ears, but one he felt deep inside his chest, reverberated through the air. Your purpose, little one, is not to seek answers from the world around you, but to understand the world within you. You must learn to embrace the balance between your past and your future, between the wisdom of your ancestors and the courage to create your own path. You are the bridge between what was and what will be. Milo blinked, stunned by the weight of the tree's words. For a moment, he felt as though he were suspended in time, between two worlds, the world beneath the earth that he had left behind, and the world above that he was still learning to navigate. It felt like the universe itself had spoken to him, and the voice echoed within him, resonating in his very soul. The tree's branches swayed once more, and the air grew lighter, as if releasing the tension that had built up. Milo stood in stunned silence, trying to comprehend the depth of the answer. The word seemed so simple, yet so complex. What did it mean to be a bridge between the past and the future? How could he embrace both the wisdom of his underground home and the unknown path ahead of him? As the last of the tree's words faded, Fern spoke softly from behind him. The answer is not meant to be understood all at once, Milo. It is something you will learn over time. The tree speaks of balance, between where you come from and where you're going. Sometimes, the path is not clear, and you must trust your instincts to guide you. Milo turned to look at her, a mix of confusion and realization on his face. But how do I begin? What does it mean to be a bridge between the past and the future? Fern smiled gently. It means accepting that your journey is your own, that you can honor your past without being bound by it. You don't have to carry all the weight of what was. And as for the future, it is a place of endless possibilities. You have the power to shape it. Milo nodded slowly, though his mind was still swirling with questions. The tree of wisdom had spoken, but the answer felt both overwhelming and liberating. He wasn't sure how to carry such a responsibility, but deep down, he felt that the tree's words were a guide, a light that would help him find his way. As the last rays of sunlight filtered through the canopy, the world around them seemed to shift. The forest, which had felt heavy with age and secrets, now seemed full of potential. The path ahead wasn't set in stone. It was fluid, open to change and growth. Milo felt a sense of calm settle over him. He didn't have all the answers, and perhaps he never would. But for the first time, he felt as though he was on the right path. He could learn from the past, but he wasn't bound by it. The future was something he could shape, slowly, thoughtfully, and with courage. Chapter 7, The Call of the Unknown. The next few days were a blur of discovery and introspection. Milo and Fern continued their journey through the forest, but now, Milo saw it all through a different lens. Where once the forest had seemed overwhelming and full of unknown dangers, it now felt like a place of growth, a space where everything was interconnected. Each step he took was part of a larger story, a story that he was only beginning to understand. Milo had always thought of himself as small and insignificant, a creature who lived in the shadows of larger beings. But as he reflected on the Tree of Wisdom's words, he began to understand that his size didn't matter. What mattered was his perspective, his willingness to learn, and his ability to adapt. The surface world had already shown him that there was beauty in change, in growth, and in the acceptance of what was yet to come. One evening, as they rested near a campfire, Milo looked up at the sky. The stars above were like 1,000 tiny pinpricks of light, scattered across the vastness of the night. The sky felt endless, and for a moment, Milo felt a pang of loneliness. He was far from the underground world he had once known, and though he had made a friend in Fern, he still felt like an outsider. There was so much he didn't understand about this world, and there were moments when the uncertainty felt overwhelming. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," Milo admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Fern, who had been sitting quietly beside him, didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared up at the stars with him, her expression thoughtful. After a long pause, she spoke softly. "None of us are ever truly ready, Milo. We all have to take that first step into the unknown. But the unknown is where we find our true selves, where we learn who we are meant to be." Milo turned to look at her, surprised by her words. He had never thought of the unknown as a place of discovery, but now that she mentioned it, he understood. The future was not something to fear. It was a canvas, waiting for him to paint his story. Fern smiled warmly. "The journey isn't about knowing exactly where you're going. It's about being willing to walk the path, even when you don't know what's ahead. And with each step, you will grow stronger, wiser, and more certain of who you are." Milo nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. He wasn't ready for everything, but that didn't mean he couldn't take the next step. The surface world might be vast and unpredictable, but it was also full of possibilities. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to start discovering them, one step at a time. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Milo felt a sense of peace. The unknown no longer seemed as daunting. It was a world full of promise, and he had the courage to face it. Tomorrow would be another day of discovery, and he was ready to embrace it. Chapter 8: The Echoes of Choice. As the days passed, Milo felt the pull of the surface world growing stronger. The deep lessons he had learned from Fern, the Tree of Wisdom, and his own experiences were beginning to shape him into someone different. The uncertainty that had once plagued him was slowly being replaced with a quiet confidence. He was learning to trust himself, his instincts, and his growing understanding of the world around him. But even as Milo's internal world began to shift, the world outside remained unpredictable. Every new path, every new encounter, felt like another lesson in resilience. The surface, for all its beauty, was still a place of danger and challenge. He had learned to respect the rhythm of life here, how every creature had its role, how the seasons changed, and how nothing stayed the same for long. It was a reminder that change was constant, and it could be both a source of fear and strength. One afternoon, as Milo and Fern traversed a narrow ridge that ran through the heart of the forest, they encountered something entirely unexpected, a figure, standing at the edge of the path. At first, Milo thought it was a trick of the light. But as they drew closer, he saw that it was a creature he had never seen before, a fox, but unlike any fox he had ever imagined. The fox was larger than any ordinary one, its fur a deep, rich shade of crimson, almost glowing in the filtered sunlight. Its eyes were sharp, intelligent, and calculating, and there was something about its presence that made the air feel thicker, charged with energy. Fern immediately stopped and lowered her head, a sign of respect. "This is Ashar," she said quietly. "He is an ancient being, one who watches over the balance of the forest." Milo blinked in awe, unsure of how to respond. Ashar's gaze shifted toward him, and for a moment, it felt as if the fox could see right through him, reading the very depths of his soul. "You've come far, little mole," Ashar's voice was like a low rumble, deep and resonant, echoing in Milo's mind more than his ears. "But the journey is never as simple as it seems. The surface has a way of testing those who walk its paths, of challenging their very essence." Milo took a step back, unsure of what to say. He had learned much from Fern and the Tree of Wisdom, but Ashar was something entirely different. He exuded power, wisdom, and an ancient presence that seemed to transcend time itself. Ashar continued, his gaze never leaving Milo. "There are two paths before you, young one. Both lead to different futures. One is the path of certainty, following the familiar, the known. The other is the path of uncertainty, the unknown, the place where change and growth lie. But beware, for both paths have their costs." Milo's heart raced. The choice was being presented to him again. For so long, he had wondered about his place in the world, and now, in front of this ancient being, the decision seemed more pressing than ever. "I've learned so much already," Milo said, his voice steady despite the swirling thoughts in his head. "I want to understand the world. But I don't know what lies ahead. How do I know which path to take?" Ashar's eyes softened, and the tension in the air seemed to lift. "The answer lies within you, Milo. It always has. The choice is not about finding the right path, but about embracing the path you are on. Trust yourself. Trust what you know. The surface may be vast and uncertain, but it is also full of possibilities. You are not bound by where you came from. You are free to choose." With that, the fox turned and began to walk away, its movements graceful and deliberate, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. As it vanished, the path before Milo seemed to shift. The forest around him had always been a maze of uncertainty, but now it felt different. It felt as though the decision was his to make, and the weight of that decision was something only he could bear. Fern, who had watched the encounter in silence, turned to Milo. "The choice is yours, Milo. There is no right or wrong path, only the path you choose to walk." Milo stood there for a moment, his mind spinning. The words of Ashar lingered in his thoughts. It wasn't about finding the perfect path or the easiest path, it was about embracing the journey, with all its uncertainty and challenges. The surface world was vast, yes, but it was also full of possibilities. It was his world to shape, and he had the power to decide which direction to take. Chapter 9, The Road Forward. The days that followed Ashar's visit were filled with quiet contemplation. Milo could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, yet he also felt a deep sense of freedom. The surface world, though vast and unknown, was a place of opportunity. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the uncertainty was part of the beauty. He didn't need to have all the answers. He just needed to keep moving forward. With Fern by his side, Milo explored the forest more deeply than ever before. He no longer saw the world as something to conquer or survive, but as something to understand, to live in harmony with. The creatures he met, the landscapes he traversed, all had their stories to tell. And slowly, Milo began to see how he fit into the bigger picture. His journey wasn't just about finding his place in the world, it was about becoming part of the world itself, with all its flaws and beauty. On the 5th day after Ashar's visit, as they walked along the edge of the forest, a familiar sight appeared in the distance, a group of animals, unlike the ones Milo had encountered before. This group was different. They were creatures that lived on the edge of both worlds, part of the forest but also tied to the human world. They were the changelings, beings who could traverse the surface world and the underground. Milo felt a stir of recognition deep within him. The changelings were the ones who had bridged the gap between the two worlds, the creatures who understood both the surface and the underground. And as he looked at them, he realized that he too had become one of them. He wasn't just a mole anymore. He was a part of something bigger, a creature of both worlds, destined to shape the future, not by following one path, but by embracing all paths. As they approached the changelings, Milo felt a surge of confidence. He had made his choice. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it was his to travel. He wasn't just a wanderer anymore, he was a creator, a bridge between two worlds. The journey had just begun. Chapter 10, The Bridge Between Worlds. The changelings were a diverse group, creatures who, like Milo, existed in the space between two worlds. They were neither fully of the underground nor of the surface, but rather, they had come to understand the balance between both realms. The changelings were a mixture of creatures, some were moles like him, others were foxes, birds, and even creatures he had never seen before, each one uniquely adapted to traverse both worlds. Milo was filled with a sense of awe as he observed them. He had spent so much time feeling like an outsider, unsure of where he belonged. But now, among the changelings, he felt a deep sense of connection. They, too, understood the tension between the underground and the surface, between what was familiar and what was unknown. Fern, ever by his side, smiled at him. These are the creatures who, like you, have chosen to embrace both the past and the future. They understand that the world is not defined by boundaries, but by the willingness to adapt, to grow, and to find harmony. Milo nodded, feeling as though he had finally found a place where he truly belonged. The changelings weren't just survivors, they were creators, builders of bridges between worlds. And that's what Milo had become. He wasn't just a mole from the underground anymore. He was part of something larger, part of a world where he could shape the future by honoring the lessons of the past. As they approached the leader of the changelings, an elderly fox with fur as white as snow, Milo felt a deep sense of respect. The fox, whose name was Solon, looked at him with piercing eyes, as though seeing right through him. "You've come far, young one," Solon said in a voice rich with wisdom, yet gentle. "And the road ahead of you is still long. But remember this, it is not the path that defines you, but the choices you make along the way." Milo felt a warmth spread through him. Solon's words echoed the teachings he had received from the Tree of Wisdom and Ashar, the idea that the journey was not about finding the perfect path, but about embracing the steps you take, the lessons you learn, and the impact you leave behind. "I've learned that the surface world is vast and full of challenges," Milo said, looking up at Solon. "But it's also full of beauty, and I think I'm starting to understand that the unknown isn't something to fear. It's something to embrace." Solon smiled, his eyes gleaming with pride. "You've learned well, Milo. You're ready now. The world needs creatures like you, those who understand that the past and the future